Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
And it's a pleasure, it's a privilege to be here today for the greatest moment in South African cricketing history, the way they beat Australia to be World Test Champions for the first time. 1889, they played their first Test match against England. Of course, they were the third ever Test playing country after England and Australia, so they are effectively one of the oldest Test playing countries, but have never actually won any really important ICC tournament before. I know you're going to say 1998, but that was a sort of pre-Champions Trophy success, which wasn't really kind of recognised as a World Cup. Now it is properly recognised as a World Cup, this triumph, overcoming Australia as well, a 2-year cycle of performances, as well as getting to the final and winning the final. I mean, absolutely fantastic day of cricket, wasn't it?
Brilliant for South Africa. I thought it was a really intriguing game of cricket. You look at it, the bold figures, 5 wickets, day and a half to spare, looks quite straightforward. They lost a couple of wickets towards the end, but actually it was an intriguing, fluctuating game, worthy of a final. And South Africa have been criticised a lot. Well, there's been some criticism flying around about who they played to get to the final. But once they got to the final, they beat the best team in the world, or previously the best team in the world, and they can claim to be the best team in the world now because they won the final. I mean, that's what being World Test Champions is all about. It's a good Australian side. It's not a great Australian side. It's a very good Australian side, and they downed them in the end relatively comfortably. But I mean, we didn't predict that after the first day. I mean, they looked down and out, South Africa, after the first day, didn't they? To come back and win like they did is a remarkable achievement.
It is a remarkable achievement to score the highest score of the match, to win the game and comfortably win it in the end. But I think sort of more than that, the shockwaves, the impact this will have on South African cricket, South African sport, the nation as a whole is so massive, because now they're not only rugby champions but also cricketing champions, and having a black captain is also massive. The first ever black captain for their cricket team, Temba Bavuma, to go with their rugby playing captain as well, another black man. So it's an incredible achievement for the nation, and something I think will give them a huge amount of confidence. I mean, Temba Bavuma in his post-match speech mentioned about a nation that had been divided and probably is still divided in many ways. But this is the kind of achievement which will unite them, at least briefly. And I mean, just talking to South Africans in the ground here today, they feel the historical impact and the potential sort of influence that it will have going down the line. Funnily enough, my former teammate Vincent van der Bijl, who played for Middlesex for one season, was the most fantastic bowler for South Africa, never had the chance to play Test cricket because he was South Africa were obviously isolated, suspended from international cricket when he was at his best. He said a metaphor for this success is it's like Table Mountain for the country. It is that enormous. It's a monolith. It's a monument to their sporting pedigree. Yeah,
and there's so much, it's a cricketing historical context to it as well, which is of failure, isn't it? Of getting into ICC events, getting to the semi-final. I think they'd lost something like 12 semi-finals, because they lost the final in Barbados last time, a game they should have won against India. I mean, they had that on toast, that game, didn't they? I mean, you don't lose a T20 match when you need 30 to win off 30 balls with 5-6 wickets left, but they managed to do it somehow or other, because I suppose India are a great side and Bumrah's a great bowler. And you go back to the ultimate, where it all started, the ultimate. I don't really want to use the word, but I'm going to have to use it because it seems unfair to bring up that word on the great day for South African cricket. The choke word when they failed in 1999 semi-final,
which you were commentating on at that moment, weren't you?
One of the great, possibly even the greatest one-day match there has ever been, certainly up there, and with a climax that was almost beyond belief.
So this was, just to remind people, this was a tie in the World Cup semi-final, wasn't it? 1 to win, and Alan Donald was run out, and the Aussies won on wickets, I think, didn't they? Wickets lost.
They were ahead of South Africa on some technicality, so South Africa had to win. A tie was good enough for Australia, and South Africa right at the end messed it up with their last wicket pair together, Klusener and Donald, and that game was up and down throughout. That was Australia against South Africa, and that was one that Aussies came out on top, and this one where Australia was subdued. And actually, we'll talk about South Africa, and rightly so, but we'll also look at what that means for Australia as well, and where some of the holes and problems are in their team. Obviously with a an eye on the Ashes. But let's talk a bit more about South Africa though, and what about that innings from Aidan Markram?
Well, I mean, a fantastic innings, an innings of great resilience, wasn't it? As much as it was skill and talent, and obviously patience and concentration. I thought today, I don't like blowing smoke up your arse really, same as you don't like doing it to me. But your intro this morning on TMS I thought was fascinating before play, and you talked about the defeat to West Indies in their first match after isolation, their first Test match, where they needed similar sort of number of runs.
They needed 79 to win with 8 wickets left
on the last day.
Yeah.
And they bottled it.
8 for 26 or something like that. Walsh and Ambrose ran through them. Yeah.
So it's an interesting comparison, and I think even though Aidan Markram would only have been 2 years old or something then, or maybe not even born, it has a sort of influence, doesn't it, over teams. They know about that. People tell them about it.
What about the failures, you mean?
The failures.
It's
deep in their psyche there somewhere, isn't it?
Well, and I think that's the point about South Africa, isn't it? Their creating history since their re-entry has been about failure. That's been the story, isn't it? Oh, South Africa again, another defeat when they should win. I mean, there was a semi-final in the World Cup in 2015. I was there in Auckland, where they didn't win a game. They were kind of like controlling, and then Grant Elliott hit a 6 in the last over, and that was actually just a really good game of cricket. And that day they were undone a little bit by the weather, because they were going really well and it rained and the innings was reduced. Whereas if they'd had their full 50 overs, they might have got a massive score and batted New Zealand out of the game. So that wasn't really a choke, but it was a tight match that they lost. And 1999 was a tight match that they lost. Barbados was a tight match that they lost. This was a tight game for large parts of it, and they won.
No, and the thing is, I mean, just to go back to Markram's innings, that even though, as I say, he wouldn't have been that conscious of those defeats in the past, people remind you of them. It's in the press, it's mentioned on commentary. You can't escape it.
No, you can't.
And it probably eats away at you just a tiny bit, in the same way as victory becomes a habit, so does defeat, and you have to try and somehow bounce out of that almost vortex, really. And that's the importance of Markram's innings, that he knew how important it was. He was the most experienced with Bavuma, the most experienced Test player in their side, batting wise anyway, and so a lot of responsibility on him, opening as well against that absolutely crackerjack Australian attack. To take that burden on, to take that responsibility on and see it through. And it was so tragic in the end when he was out, wasn't it? With 4 to go, 4 to win. He tried to hit the winning runs, or no, it was actually 6 to win, wasn't it? He tried to hit the winning runs, or at least hit a winning boundary, leave it 2 to win, caught at square leg. I was in the crowd in the Warner stand. It was like you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Well, there was total devastated silence from everybody. I think even the impartials, probably even the Australians, in the end could see the importance of this victory to South Africa and probably wanted it in a blaze of glory.
Yeah.
And poor old Markram had to be dragged off, and he wandered off with his head in absolute despair. But of course, over time, he'll realise how proud he should be of that innings.
Well, I was actually commentating at the moment. I didn't actually realise he was out, because there was so little reaction from anybody. You follow the shot and you almost look for the mime. If you lose track of the ball, where's the ball gone? I knew it had been stopped, but Travis Head didn't celebrate at all, did he? Just got up. It looked like a regulation piece of fielding from a long way away. There was no reaction from the Australians, no initial reaction from Markram, no reaction from the crowd. Just looked like a good stop with the ball going out before. But only when you see the replay, you realise what was a brilliant catch from Head, diving away to his right hand side. But and you're right, Markram had to be dragged away. He was congratulated by all the Australians, which is great to see. And that, I think they you appreciate quality, don't you? And that was a quality innings under pressure. He came in on a pair, but what was interesting, he got the mark first ball, positive dab into the offside straight away, and got South Africa going. And then Kagiso Rabada at the end of the Australian innings talked about South Africa being more proactive, and they weren't in that first innings particularly, were they?
They were a little bit on the second day.
On the second day, yeah.
The first evening we talked about on our previous podcast how sort of passive they were. On the second morning, even though they got bowled out 138, there was a bit more sort of willingness to have a go, to try and drop singles, to push the odd one, knock the odd one over the top, and just be a bit more positive. And I think that kind of translated.
They must have talked about it, mustn't they? They must have talked about it.
And I think that little bit of success, which was, brutally cut down by Pat Cummins at 6 for 28 in the first innings, would have given them some kind of confidence and idea for the second innings.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And also, I mean, I don't understand it. I don't understand how it happens. The pitch just seemed to lose any of its venom on the third day. People say, well, it's to do with the when the sun comes out and when it's overcast. Well, the sun was out on the first day after tea, and what was it, 63 for 9? So how does that work? But for whatever reason, third day, and Australia showed that with that last wicket pair. And actually, I thought that was an interesting sort of insight for South Africa as well. They're thinking, this is quite difficult to get this last wicket. Sort of damn Aussies, they always do this. They don't give anything away. You've got to fight for every single bit of it. But actually, it showed that this pitch is perhaps easing out. And there was, for the rest of the game, it was relatively straightforward for the batters, wasn't it? I mean, look, it spun a bit, kept a bit low, but there was no. There didn't seem to be any of the demons there were in the first 2 days. I don't know what you thought about it. Was it to do with the fact that batters were a bit rusty? Was it to do with pitch was a bit fresher?
I think there's a lot of factors actually. Cloud cover does have an effect, but as you say, it was quite bright at times when wickets fell. I think early on there was that tufty grass, even though it was dry, was helping the ball move, but over time with a few rollings that got flattened out and it just slowed as well. I think actually the bowlers got tired, didn't they? Yeah. Because they hadn't played much test cricket recently, and even though you can do lots of warm-up preparation and training and bowling in the middle for spells and so on, it's not the same as a match. The adrenaline of playing a test match, a final, takes it out of you. Mind you, having said that, I noticed Mitchell Starc in that last over when they needed one to win, he was still bowling at 90 miles an hour. Yeah. I mean, amazing athlete, Mitchell Starc, isn't he? Incredible. He got the 50-odd runs in Australia's second innings as well to keep them in the game. So I think it was that. I think bowlers got a bit tired. Batters probably worked out how to play on it a little bit over time and got wiser to the pitch's sort of capricious nature slightly. But I think overall, the sun today and the rolling, gradual rolling, just deadened it.
Yeah, it must have done. I mean, Steve Smith said after 2 days, on the third morning, he said, "No, it's too paced. It's too paced. It's difficult, But then, lo and behold, third day, it wasn't so difficult. Only 4 wickets went in the whole day's play, and then today, South Africa had enough in the tank to get over the line and win the match.
But not without a fight. I mean, you have to hand it to the Aussies today. I was gripped this morning, sat in the Warner stand, just watching Hazelwood at long leg, getting ready for his next over, drinking, toweling himself off, doing lots of loosening exercises, thinking, I'm not going to give them a sniff of victory here. I'm not going to give them anything. And bowled maiden after maiden. Actually, of course, in yesterday's play, the third day, I don't think any of the Australian seamers bowled a maiden over, which indicates how South Africa worked out to just rotate the strike. It doesn't need lots of big shots. It's just a little bit of rotation of the strike. Annoying to bowl. Bowlers get so frustrated when they're a bowler like Hazelwood nagging away on a length. If you are a bit lax in the slit in the cover region and you let a single through, bowlers are furious about that, and that expends energy, expends frustration. In the end, it has a telling effect on their approach and their effectiveness, really. But I mean, still, the Aussies were at them all morning today. Only 25 runs in the first hour's play from 12 overs or something. They just begrudged them every single run. So Glenn McGrath has handed down a great legacy to those fast bowlers.
Well, what analogy do you want to use? I mean, they wouldn't give you their potato shavings. They wouldn't, give you the bristles out of their razor. They wouldn't give you the dandruff off their head, would they? Nothing. They wouldn't give you the dead skin off their feet. I mean, they don't give you anything. Please. And that is why it's such a notable day, I think, for South Africa, because they came up against a very good Australian side who were intent on giving them nothing, and they come away with a fantastic victory to put all those failures into the past. It might look. Who knows how it's going to pan out in the future? We could just talk about that actually for South Africa. We'll talk about Australia in a moment, but for South Africa, it might be their only World Test Championship win ever, but at least they have done it once, which is more than England have done, isn't it, so far? Anyway, and it's about time. I think we've talked about this before. It's about time England started to really think about getting to this final, isn't it? And really having a real tilt at it in the next round. But South Africa's fixture list now is bizarre because their next home test match is not until October, November next year when they play Australia. England are one of their home teams in the 6 series World Test Championship final. Everyone plays 6 series. So those are the 2 home series, or 2 of the 3 home series for South Africa. Before then, they've got 3 away series. They play against India away, Pakistan away, and Sri Lanka away. I was talking to Andrew Sampson, who's we all know Andrew, but he's the official stats man for the South African Cricket Board, and he said we're going to be bottom of the table before we get to play at home next because of all those tough assignments away. That's a little bit pessimistic, but this is a moment in time for them. They've done it once, something to savour for ever and ever. They put all those failures behind them, but it all starts again very soon, though, doesn't it? The World Test Championship starts again. Australia going to the West Indies, that's their first series in the World Test Championship, and then of course England playing against India in 6 days' time, and that's their first match in the next iteration of the World Test Championship. It keeps on rolling, cricket keeps on rolling.
So it's quite a special, in a way emotional moment for me actually, watching these South Africans win today, because I spent quite a bit of time in South Africa playing cricket for both provinces and club sides in the 1980s through the apartheid era. But even though they weren't able to play Test cricket then, you could feel the desire, the passion for the game and the longer format of the game as well. And there were so many great players that played in that era of South African cricket. Barry Richards, Mike Proctor, Vincent van der Baal I mentioned earlier, Graham Pollock, the uncle of Sean Pollock of course, Clive Rice, who was a star player for Notts for many years as well, and many others. Eddie Barlow. Ray Jennings, who of course was the father of Keaton Jennings, now playing for Lancashire and has played for England. Ray Jennings, a brilliant wicketkeeper, and none of them were ever able to play Test cricket. Well, most of them anyway. 1 or 2 were able to just play a little bit before they were suspended from international cricket. And I just felt this passion, this commitment to the game when I played there, and wanted to help the integration with the black community even during the apartheid era. And I had made many good friends like Vincent van der Baal from the years playing there, and I felt their pain when they lost those finals or semi-finals in the past. So I'm just so proud of them. I'm so delighted for their resilience, their continued ambition to be excellent, actually. And actually, someone like Aidan Markram, I briefly met a couple of times. He's the sort of Chris Wokes of South African cricket in a way, because he's such a lovely guy, actually, Markram. I mean, he's just so gently spoken and modest and yet so talented. And of course, not only did he get his 130 odd today, he also took key wickets. He got Steve Smith in the first innings as well. So anyway, I'm just incredibly proud of a community that have committed so much to cricket and have had so much adversity, really, not necessarily their own doing in terms of the players. And at last they've actually been able to experience triumph at the home of cricket. Great moment for all of them, as we've said. And just on Markram, I noticed actually when he came off last night, the South African press officer went over to him and said, "Can you come and speak to radio and television?" And he said, "No, not at the moment." It's almost as if like the job's not done yet. I don't want to say anything before we've actually get this job done. Of course, he does all his talking today because he's player of the match, and a lot to celebrate. And he went up to the dressing room. He didn't even come back down and do something 15, 20 minutes, half an hour after the day's play, which you'd normally expect someone who's scored a brilliant 100 at Lords to do. But it was kind of like, no, let's complete the job. I actually felt a bit, I described his dismissal, I felt a bit sorry for him that he wasn't there at the end to see South Africa home, but as you say, he won't worry too much about that. We talked a lot about South Africa, Yoz. Let's end by talking about Australia. They go to the West Indies. They've got this brilliant bowling attack. He's getting on a little bit, isn't it? And they've got a batting lineup that looks, well, just on the evidence of this, unsettled, isn't it?
A little unsettled at the moment, yeah. And they might have to rejuvenate it a little bit. I mean, Khawaja, he's going to be 39 by the time the Ashes come round. He made that fine double 100 in Sri Lanka, but at very different conditions. So there's one issue there. Labuschagne, was in the middle order. They put him up to open. Constas they've introduced, but he wasn't trusted, inverted commas, for this game. They wanted to go with Labuschagne experience. Cameron Green bumped up to number 3, can't bowl at the moment because of his back problem. Give him a go at 3, didn't work here, but he's a decent player. But is he a number 3? Steve Smith, we don't know about Smith, do we, because of his hand injury. Obviously, he's a banker for them, but is he going to be fit to play in the West Indies? So they've got a few issues at the top of the order, and they've got this bowling attack that, look, I was watching it, I was thinking, my God, this is like Rolls Royce bowling. But it is, if you keep that attack out in the field, South Africa, were gradually able to sort of get on top of them and wear them down. What about? I mean, obviously, I'm looking ahead to the Ashes, and you'd still say, from this distance, in June before England play India, that Australia are clear favourites to win the series and retain the Ashes. But is there something there for England perhaps to encourage England, or for them to work with against this Australian side?
Well, absolutely, and I think that the key point is those opening batsmen. Having an opening pair that you can rely on and who are fairly consistent and who are sort of inked in as the number 1 and 2 in the team is very important. And England have that, really. I mean, obviously they could come unstuck against India, Zach Crawley and Ben Duckett, but if they don't, then England have a consistent opening pair who keep putting up 50 opening stands, or have done over the last couple of years. And
and got Jacob Bethel waiting in the wings as well, so they have got an option should that fail at the top of the order.
Whereas Australia have been experimenting with different players. They had Sam Consters opening one test match in the winter, didn't they, in India, against India, who made a sort of dramatic entry, and maybe he's a consideration. Marcus Harris has been performing well for Lancashire, hasn't he? Even though Lancashire as a whole have been absolutely shocking, but he's got lots of runs, and I'm sure he'll come into the reckoning. I wouldn't be surprised if Khawaja will retire.
Before the Ashes?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he is getting on now, and he looks a bit vulnerable. And lots of players of that sort of vintage sort of tend to hang up their boots or hang up their bat around that sort of time. He's had a run of poorish form. I know he made a double hundred in Sri Lanka, but other than that, he hasn't had much to laugh about for a few months. And I don't think Labuschagne's a solution either, particularly. I mean, I'd prefer to see him at 3, I think, and that sort of 3-4 Smith-Labuschagne combination. So they've got an issue there. Obviously, they've got 2 tests in the Caribbean to maybe sort it out.
3 tests.
3 tests, is it? Yeah. But there's a potential there to sort it out. But we'll see what happens. It's certainly a chink of opportunity for England, I'd say, in the long term.
Yeah, and the other issue they've got, Bo Webster at 6 in this game. Really, I think they'd like Cam Green to be at 6, wouldn't they, and be able to bowl. But of course, which
would be a huge bonus.
Yeah, because he's
serious bowler.
Well, if he gets it right, he's a serious bowler. Yeah, but when you have back issues at a young age, it can be a big problem for him. He's had that surgery to help sort it out. So that would be an ideal. That they get him back in the middle order and they sort their problems out at the top of the order. The bowling attack, it still looks pretty good, doesn't it? If they can keep on going, Ashes series is hard, isn't it? It's 5 matches. Are they going to play? Are the big 3 going to play in all 5 of those Test matches? There are some gaps between the games this time, aren't there? Which can help if you're having to constantly back up. And the other thing as well about it is, can you as a batting side keep them out in the field? And England's approach generally tends to be bang bang, let's have a go, put them under pressure, and then your innings might only last 75 overs or something like that, 80 overs, and then you're not putting those 4th, 5th spells back into their legs. So there's that issue there, whether England just look at that aspect of it, or do they say actually putting them under pressure and taking them on is the best way to counteract them? Because here South Africa kind of sat in a bit, and for the most part they sat in against them, didn't they? Mainly because of the pitch conditions, but they sat in against that bowling attack. Well, that's one way to play it, and ultimately it's successful. It's not the way England looked to play. They looked to put the pressure back on and try and knock them off their length or disrupt them or whatever. They think that's a better way, because if you do just sit in, sometimes you can go nowhere and suddenly you lose some wickets and you're 100 for 6 or something like that, and you've gone nowhere. So that's England's approach. It's a very different approach from South Africa's, but that's sort of an Ashes factor, isn't it? That ageing bowling side, top class. Don't get me wrong, it's top class. And if they can keep them fit and firing all 5 Test matches, then that's going to could well be a handful for England. But it ain't necessarily so they're going to be able to do that.
No, and actually, just for England, obviously it's a long way off the Ashes, but that will just give them a little smidgen of confidence to see Australia can be beaten, and they're sort of persistence and their resilience can be overcome by a tenacious...
England know Australia can be beaten in England, don't they, with the Duke's ball or whatever in English conditions. But it's mighty difficult in Australia.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't beaten them in a test match in Australia since 2010-11. I mean, and they've gone there and they've just been thumped every single time, and they haven't even looked like winning a test match.
Well, we don't want to end on a negative, pessimistic note. So
realistic.
Fine. So we'll end by just celebrating that fantastic achievement by South Africa today. One other little thought, actually. Themba Bavuma, the first South African black cricket captain, raising the mace as the Test World Champions. And of course, it was 50 years ago next week that Clive Lloyd raised the World Cup, the first ever World Cup, 1975, captain of the West Indies. So a black man raising the World Cup 50 years ago, and a black man raising the World Cup, or the World Mace, the World Test Championship Mace today. Fantastic performance by South Africa, and it was absolutely compelling to watch. And just as a little mention, I interviewed Clive Lloyd the other day. Next week on Substack, there will be a full interview with him and the highlights of that 1975 100 that he made here at the home of cricket on June the 19th, I think it was, 1975, to see West Indies to victory, or at least captain them to victory. So there'll be an interview with Clive Lloyd exclusively on Substack. The Crickverse, if you Google the Crickverse, it will come up, and that interview will be posted up there on Monday. And actually, just also, our next podcast is going to be live at the Square Club in Bristol on Wednesday the 18th, so next Wednesday the 18th of June. There's still a few tickets available to raise money for Sid Lawrence's MND cause. Live to look back at this fantastic performance, to look ahead to the England-India series, and also to talk about our scariest moments in cricket. So the Square Club, 18th of June. Ticket links will be at the bottom of this podcast, show notes.
And that starts at 7 p.m. in Bristol, and then not long after that we'll be rolling into action with our regular look back at each day's play in the India versus England series. That starts on Friday, and also coming up in July, later in July. I've mentioned this a few times, but for those new listeners, we have done a 6-part podcast series looking back at the 2005 Ashes series, and we had a great fun doing that, looking back, didn't we, with the build-up, and then we looked at each test match individually as well. So that's coming up in July, middle of July, something like that, yours?
Yeah, around about the time of the Lord's Test, actually, here, which is the 10th of July, we'll be releasing that. So lots of podcast action, material, content to come on this site in the next couple of weeks or so. So look out for that.